All right, what's going on at YouTube? Welcome back to your favorite cyclist YouTube channel. This week, we're talking about something fancy called TPU Tubes. But before we get into today's video, if you're new to my channel, make sure you head down below, hit that subscribe button for me. If you already are subscribed, make sure you hit that bell icon right next to that. That way you get notified every time I upload. That way you don't miss any of this awesome cycling content on this channel. So like I said, today we're talking about TPU Tubes. So some of you may have heard of TPU tubes. Some of you may have seen the orange inner tubes out there. That's probably what most people see, are the small looking orange inner tubes. Probably what I would say the most common thing people see is. So what is the point of a TPU inner tube? So let's talk about just standard inner tubes right here. Butyl rubber. Been around for forever. They work great. No real issues with them. Other than they're kind of big. Packaging size, a little bit big. They are able to puncture, stuff like that. Kind of your standard things like that. It works. Does a decent job for what it is. Pretty affordable to make. And you know, this is what you see in 95% of bikes you see out there. Just a regular butyl rubber tube. Honestly, even more than bikes, to be fair. You see a butyl rubber tube. So, if we go take a look at a TPU tube, we'll open this one. This one here is from the Bike Tube brand here. And if we open this guy up, so this is a 700 by 32 to 45 that we have here. And if we open this guy up, this is what you get here. It's this little orange inner tube here. You can see the difference. So both of these are roughly about the same size. This is actually a smaller size tube. I think this is a 700. This is like a 700 by like 28 tube or something along those lines. So it is actually a smaller width tube than this guy, than the TPU tube version here. However, if you look at those two, you can see they're folded up the same direction, and that's kind of your difference there. And you can see the difference. I'll go right here too. Look at that difference there. And that's really where TPU tubes come in handy, is when you're looking for space savings, you're looking to carry them on your bike. That's why a lot of times you see orange inner tubes, like just like this one, strapped on like mountain bike frames, stuffed into jersey pockets. This is why, because they're such a small and lightweight tube. Now, there are some other benefits to a TPU tube. So number one, they're lightweight. We'll throw both these on a scale in just a minute to show you kind of what the weight differences are between them. More puncture resistant. It is pretty incredible how well these do against punctures. While I was at Sea Otter talking to them, he actually had some samples, just little pieces of these out on the bench, and he would jab them with his knife, and he would push as hard as he could into that thing, and it wouldn't puncture. It was kind of crazy. Versus a regular rubber tube, just put it right in there and it would cut right through. Kind of crazy how well that worked for puncture resistance. Better elasticity, so obviously a little bit different material than a regular butyl rubber inner tube. So you have a little bit different material, which then helps you get a little bit better quality on riding. Honestly, not really what I'm looking for with these, but it is kind of a benefit to the TPU tubes. Better air retention, so it does hold the air better in this tube versus just a standard rubber tube. It doesn't leak down as fast through all the tiny little micro pores that you see in regular tubes. So will hold air a little bit longer. And then of course, like I said, easier and smaller to store on your bike. By far the biggest thing. So works really well. Now let's talk about just a couple cons here. So really the cons are, once you inflate this, you're not getting it back down to the size ever. It's not going to go back down to this size. And once it's inflated, it's inflated. Along with that, it is a little bit more difficult to patch. You need specific patches in order to do it. So nice thing with these Bike Tube brand ones, they include an alcohol pad here to wipe it down, and then they include those specific patches kind of included in there. So you have those nicer patches in here and kind of the stuff to patch this tube should you need to. Works really good. That's kind of one of the downfalls. It's not as easy to patch as it's not as easy and simple to patch as just your regular rubber tubes like most of us have done. It's not just the simple patch kit you pick up at Walmart. You can patch, scratch it up, throw a patch on, rubber cement, and you throw your patch on. Not that simple. A little bit more to it to do for that. And then of course, the other really main downfall is just price on these. You can pick up a regular tube. I think I was at Walmart the other day and I picked up some 20-inch tubes for like $4 a piece, and they had some up to like a 26-inch, even 700. I think the 700 was like $5 or $6. So you're paying $5 or $6 for a regular tube. A tube like these is anywhere between $25 to $30. And you kind of see that's a bit of a price difference there. You're spending, essentially up to $60 just to put tubes in your bike on both tires versus 10. So A little bit more expensive for them, but I feel like the benefits of these kind of outweighs that cost, especially for using these as a spare. And that's why I say most likely you'll see, most of the time you'll see these as a spare for those of us running tubeless is honestly where you see where you see these the most, I feel like. I personally have these on my gravel bike as a spare, my road bike as a spare, and the Poseidon Norton as a spare. All just to make sure I have the space, and it makes those bags like so much smaller. So we're going to talk about the weight on these. So like I said, so I've swapped the tubes out in those 3 bikes here. I have those exact tubes I pulled out, so we can look at size and we can look at the weight on those and see how much we're saving from, you know, a road bike tube to a gravel bike tube to a 27.5 mountain bike tube. You can see the difference there. So let's move over to my scale, show you what we got, show you kind of comparisons on size. We'll weigh them, see what we got. All right, so let's take a look at some weights here. We got our scale here. Let's start off. We're going to start off with the road tube. So obviously you can see the difference. So this is your standard road inner tube that you'd have in there. Obviously you've got the, the hair tie strap right there to hold it all together. And then we got the TPU tube here from Bike Tube here. So we have these 2 versions here. So we'll go ahead. We got it in pounds here. So go ahead and throw that guy on. So we're at 3.3 pounds. Otherwise coming in at 94 grams. What we're looking at for just our standard old inner tube there. Now, if we throw our TPU tube on here, we are at 1.7 ounces. Comes out to 49 grams with the little rubber strap on there too. So 49 grams for the difference there. So 49, 93. So a little under half the weight for just a road bike tube. Now, of course, that's the smallest one we have here. Let's move up to our gravel tubes here. So for gravel tubes here, this is like a 650B by 45 millimeter tube here. And then the same thing applies for this guy. Same size. So we go ahead, weigh that tube on here. We're looking at 4.8 ounces or 137 grams. Go ahead and weigh our small TPU tube. We're looking at 1.2 grams or 35 grams. So I will say I do have 2 different brands in our tubes here. I'll talk about that in a second, but 34 grams. So 34 grams versus 137. So we are a quarter of the weight and super small on size. And that makes a huge difference when you're hucking this thing along in a gravel bike. That kind of difference there is where it starts to be worth it. Now we'll take a look at mountain bike tubes. So these are a 27.5. This is a 27.5 by 2.4 tube, 27.5 by 2.4 TPU tube. So this is where I think we're going to see some big difference here. So if we go ahead and weigh that guy there, we're looking at 9.7 ounces on the mountain bike, regular mountain bike tube. Comes out to 275 grams. Now if we throw our TPU tube on here, we're looking at 1.6 ounces. Comes out to 44 grams. So 44 grams to 275. Yeah, so that's like a sixth, less than a sixth of the weight for this guy. And again, look at that. I mean, the size difference of that is gigantic, especially for a mountain bike tube. Like, carrying this around is a whole lot easier than carrying this guy around, for sure. So you can see the weight and size differences are pretty drastic, which is for me personally is one of the reasons I really wanted to give these guys a shot, was just so I'd have something less on my bikes. I'm a big guy on storing stuff on my bike and getting as much storage as I can out of my bike. So when this is taking up almost my entire bag on my mountain bike, if I can get rid of this and swap it to this, I have so much more room for stuff and a smaller pack to go with it, including on my gravel bike. This used to be in that salsa bag on my down tube and took up a good majority of that bag. Now this is in there. So it's pretty crazy the kind of weight and size differences between these two. So like I said, I do have 2 different brands here. So let me tell you a little bit about the 2 brands we have here. Like I said, we have 2 brands. The first one we're going to talk about is the Bike Tube brand here. So the Bike Tube brand actually provided these inner tubes for me to test out. They actually gave me a set so I could try them out, put them on my bike, show you guys what the deal is with TPU tubes. Now, I'll say the Bike Tube brand, a little bit more affordable than the Tubelito. We'll get to that in a second. So these guys are on that lesser side, about 25 bucks for a tube. Now, obviously, they do weigh a little bit more, and I'll get into that. I'll get kind of into why these weigh a hair more than the Tubelito ones. But there's nothing wrong with these at all. They definitely work. Like I said, a little bit more cost effective and no real issues there. You also get the 2 patches with it and everything to do the patches. So you kind of get everything all in one kit for the tube. Now, weighs a little bit more. So what's the difference with that? So let's talk about Tubelito. I'll kind of say why this one weighs a little bit more. Now, the Tubelitos. So that's both the gravel tire and the mountain bike tire. And I paid for both of these. I bought I bought the Tubelito brand tube myself. Now, why did I buy these instead of getting the same ones from Bike Brand? So the big reason is I kind of run different size tubes on my bikes. My gravel bike is a 650B. My mountain bike is a 27.5. Sadly, 27.5 doesn't seem to be both cases, honestly. Doesn't seem to be the one that wants to stick around. Now, there's 27.5 TPU tubes for mountain bikes. No problem at all. For a gravel bike, a little bit harder to find. So when I talk to the guys at Tubelito, they do things a little bit differently with them. So what they have is their tubes are actually sized for both a 650B up to a 700C, and same thing with their mountain bike tubes. The mountain bike tubes are set up for either 27.5 or 29. So you might be like, how does it fit both? How does that work at all? Like, how can it be both of them? That doesn't make any sense, right? So what they said is they pretty much sized their tubes so that they are in between the 2 sizes. So in between a 27.5 and in between a 29, which is essentially the same thing as a 650 and a 700. So they size them in between the 2 sizes. That allows you to fit them into a smaller size, 650B or 27.5. You can fit them in there, no issues at all. And then when you inflate it, that tube's going to expand some. So you can fit that into a 700C or 29er, no problem there either. Now I kind of like that. That was kind of a big point for me with the Tubelitos, because I have bikes of all different sizes. I have 27.5, 26, 29. I have 650B, 700. I have everything. So for me, being able to buy essentially one tube and just be able to use that in whatever bike I want to put it in makes a difference. So we'll talk about weights here. So why do the Tubelito ones weigh less than the Bike Brand ones? So Tubelito has a couple different versions of their tubes. They have the lightest weight version here, the original, which is the one that I bought. I bought the original one. That's just what works for me. That's what I thought would work the best for me. So I bought the original ones. Then they have kind of a higher puncture protection one. That's about twice the thickness, I believe. That one is going to be more comparable to the Bike Tube brand. Those two weights should be a little bit more comparable to each other versus these guys. These guys, I will say, even from just messing with them in my hands, you can tell this is a little bit thinner. Now again, does it make a difference? Not really. Especially in my case where I'm using these as a spare pretty much to get me back home is essentially what these tubes would be for. They're not going directly into my tires and running them every single day. These are getting stored on my bike and needed to be used when they need to be used. Kind of the basics there. Now, if I was using these every single day, want a little more puncture protection, I probably would have gone for something kind of like the Bike Tube brand or the upgraded version of the Tubelito. Now, Tubelito, big name brand. That's kind of what everybody knows for these is the Tubelito. If you search up TPU tubes, you're probably going to search up Tubelito, or you're going to end up Tubelito as one of the first brands you pop up with. So kind of a name brand, you pay a little bit more. Like I said, these are on that more expensive side, around the $30 price point for at least the ones I bought here, the kind of the basic versions here. So that's kind of your difference. That's why the weight on this guy's a little bit more, is because the TPU is kind of that thicker TPU versus the little bit thinner TPU that the standard Tubelitos come in. So do I recommend TPU tubes for everybody? They're definitely a nice thing to have. Like I said, personally, I'm having these as my spare tubes for tubeless setups. Kind of what I have these basic as. Even if you're running tubes, carrying this around as your spare is a lot easier than carrying around a big, regular, standard butyl rubber tube. Sure, you're paying a little bit more for it, but you kind of have to weigh. For me, I had to weigh the difference between carrying a lot of extra weight in a tube and a lot of extra size, having something to store that, or carrying something this small and just having this to deal with, whether that's throwing it in a bag, throwing it in my jersey pocket, whatever that is. This is a lot easier to carry with you. And that's ultimately why I decided to go with these as my spare tubes. And I will say that I believe it's Bike Tube brand does have fat bike tubes. That has always been one of my ideas with the fat bike. If you guys remember a couple years ago now, when we first bought our fat bike, we did a thing where we tried to shed as much weight as we could off that bike. And honestly, TPU tubes are kind of the last thing I need to do that, like, see what we can save. So if you guys get enough views on this video, that may happen. We'll throw some in the fat bike and see how they last long term. But that's gonna be but for me personally, it's not gonna be a daily use of these tubes. It's definitely something you can do. People do it all the time. Like I said, you're gonna save some of that rotation mass on your bike. You're gonna gain a little bit more comfortable ride just due to the properties of the TPU versus the standard butyl rubber. Should be a little bit more comfortable ride for you. There are benefits to both. So if you guys are interested in checking out either one of these tubes, either the Bike Tube brand or Tubelito, I'm gonna have a link in the description down below. Big thanks to Bike Tube brand for hooking me up with a set of them so I could try them out, share them with you guys, tell you all about TPU tubes, and then of course Tubelito that I paid for myself so I could have these as spares on my bikes. If you guys enjoyed the video or at least learned something today, give this video a big thumbs up. Appreciate the support. Any comments or questions, let me know down in the comment section below. Love talking to you guys. Love answering questions you guys have. And I will see you in the next video. Thanks for watching today.